think we're going to get started, everyone. We have Jonathan Perlman, and he'll be talking about on-the-move migrations debunked.
Good?
Good. Here
All
he
right.
is.
Thank you.
Yay.
So, welcome. 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 Okay, right here. Good. Okay, so let's get this thing started. So yeah, welcome. I'm Jonathan Perlman. I come from Canada. You know, the north from the border, the other border. That's not gonna get closed. So, anyways, so I come from Montreal, Canada. I'm a senior web developer at Dawson College in Montreal, Canada, and I'm also a teacher. I'm a WordCamp speaker, and also apparently Chris Lima compares me to an Excel super geek, along with Shanta. So Dawson College, this is basically what we do web-wise. Of course, we do WordPress, we do Drupal, Moodle, web work, and a few other different things. We are using Git with Git-O-Lite admin, which is essentially all command line, so there's no fancy interface on it. We are using Nginx, phpMyAdmin, and MariaDB for our WordPress installations. And by the way, just I know I started a little quick. My slides are at jperlman.ca. So, migrations. There we go. So what we're going to cover today is basically we're going to move from WordPress.com to a self-hosted installation. We're also going to talk about the entire overview of migrating WordPress. We're going to talk about how to actually transfer a site as a one-time affair, meaning going from a host to a host. We're going to also talk about continuous migrations with plugins. I'm going to talk about DNS a bit. After the migration is done, as part of the migration, how do we handle DNS? I'm going to talk about checking your site and how you can fix post-migration, fix your issues, and actually know how it's going to go. And of course, I'll give you a couple of resources at the end. So, so far so good? Okay. So WordPress.com to a self-hosted installation. Now, I'm not going to talk about this much because we're not here for WordPress.com. But in the event that you do get a faculty member or a person in your institution that is using WordPress, but they're using the other flavor of WordPress, which is the hosted installation by Automatic, WordPress.com. It's basically a free spot for them to sign up a blog. It looks very similar to the WordPress.org installation, except there is not much functionality for plugins and themes. They have a very limited selection. Therefore, once they outgrow that installation, they're going to come to you sooner or later and say, yeah, I want to move from WordPress.com. How do we do this? And that is basically an export. You're going to export their data. They're going to export their data. Somebody is going to export their data from WordPress.com. Of course, Automatic wants to try to help you and, of course, try to charge you for that service. But you can do it yourself with an XML feed, a data file that you can download from WordPress. Now, there is an option on the left, delete site. Whatever you do, do not delete the site at this point in time. There is, what happens is that the export is content only. Your export is content only. There are no files aside from your content that you're going to get. So therefore, when you do the import into WordPress.org, a self-hosted installation, you're only going to get the content in the data file, and then what's going to happen is that through the importer, it's going to go back to WordPress.com and pull down all of those resources in the media library. Once you're happy with that importation and your media library, at that point, you are safe to delete the site. Not before, okay? In fact, what I would probably do is delete the site once your new site is completely live, but that's a whole different story. So basically, take away from this, delete the site after seeing everything in your media gallery and confirming it's all there. But here's the thing, as I was saying, your files, all you're going to get is from the media gallery, and you're getting the download from the exporter. Therefore, you have to pick a theme, ideally from the theme repository. You might get the same theme that you had at WordPress.com. Same thing for plugins. You're going to have to go to the plugin directory to get those plugins, to get those functionalities back. Now, according to the Jetpack team, there is actually parity between Jetpack, the self-hosted Jetpack installation, and WordPress.com. Therefore, if you install Jetpack, ideally, a lot of the functionality that you had is still going to be there. Okay. And of course, you can always do custom development in the theme and/or on the plugin side to get back that functionality, and in fact, take it to another level. So, migrating overall. How do we migrate overall? Firstly, what are we migrating? We're migrating code. What is code? Code are lines of PHP, CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. The media library, as you visually can see, is JPEGs, PDFs, PNGs, images, static resources. That's your media library. And on top of that, we have to migrate is the content. The content is your SQL database. Your SQL database contains all your posts, all your pages, your menus, all of your extra custom post types if you have any. So you got to migrate these three main big blocks. So it is a lot. We're going to go through it literally line by line. So we're basically logging into the old host. We're going to download WordPress. We're going to download a MySQL database. You're going to log into the new host, create a brand new database. You're going to change the configuration file for WordPress. You're going to upload WordPress to the new host, import your database to the new host. You're going to change some internal configurations in WordPress. You're going to change a host file, which I'll talk about. And then finally, you're going to change the DNS. So how do we do this and what do we use? So the more reliable route in migrating WordPress is actually not to use WordPress or any other plugin for that matter. To migrate WordPress reliably, there we go, you actually don't use WordPress. You need to use a file transfer program, FTP. FileZilla is computer compatible, OS compatible. You need a database client. phpMyAdmin is generally the accepted standard. But if you want to use a real program client, HeidiSQL for Windows only. Mac has SQL Pro. If you're a command line type of person, you can certainly use command line tools, tar, SCP, bring the files together, zip the files together, send them over to the other server. SCP, sed would be for changing the files, find replace. Vim also is a good tool to use. And then finally, WPCLI would certainly help you out. So you don't have to use command line, but you do have to use an FTP program and a database client, bare minimum. So for that one-time transfer that we're going to do. So we're going to log into the old host. We're going to log into the old host. We're going to download WordPress. And then we're going to also download that database, the SQL file. Now, in the web hosting world, generally, there's something called CPanel. CPanel is how people control their website. Ultimately, they can create accounts, they can create databases, they can create email, they can create all these fun stuff. They can magically one click install WordPress. This is generally a web host. This is like a Bluehost, HostGator, Site5.com, those kind of hosts. So they're the typical $5 a month hosts. Now, I'm not saying anything bad about these hosts. I'm just saying this is what is there, and I'm not gonna talk about the pros and cons of who is better or who is not. So anyway, CPanel. So this is what you're gonna basically see on a host like them in the $5 a month range. Now, basically what you're gonna find is a backup. You're gonna be able to download a backup. Downloading a backup is it's a manual affair, meaning you have to actually click and download the physical file. You can certainly download the entire home directory, the entire account you can download, but be careful. That account may include email. Therefore, you might be actually downloading your client's email, your colleague's email. So you want to be careful about that. Maybe if it's just used for web hosting, fine, no problem. You can certainly download a copy of the database alone, download a copy of the physical home directory. So essentially, you're downloading your content or you're downloading the database. And if you do a full backup, if you get that full download, which is probably the safest bet, but it's going to be the biggest of them all, you're going to see all these files, all these folders. You only really need 2 folders to worry about. You need to look into the home dir folder. Within there, you will find a public_HTML folder. Inside public_HTML is basically where your WordPress site lives. Give or take, probably, but definitely within public_HTML. Maybe within there might be a couple subdirectories, but that's, I can't really speak to that because that's, every installation is different. But inside public HTML is where you're looking for. Secondly, you're going to find the MySQL folder at this level, and then look for the site, the backup, the file ending in SQL. So if you don't have access to CPanel, you're going to have to go in via FTP, SFTP, secure FTP, and download the files that way. Now, on every host, as I said before, there's differences between hosts. You might be looking for an htdocs folder. You might be looking for public_HTML. You might be looking for www, some folder that contains WordPress. Wherever that folder is, download all the files. Also, you need to export the database. You definitely need to export that database with phpMyAdmin, so you can do an export of the database. Now, some sites are small, some sites are large. In a larger installation of WordPress, what's going to happen is you're not going to be able to download the export via phpMyAdmin. Things will time out. Because the site is too large, there's too many tables, it's not going to be able to handle it. It's a issue on the host side where the host is just doesn't have the right settings to do the download in full. So at that point, what you're going to have to rely on is a command line dump at that point of the files. There are 2 methods you can use: WP-CLI. You can certainly do a WP-CLI WP-DB export. That will do an export of your database. In the event that your database is larger than a gig, 2 gigs, WP-CLI is not going to be good enough, because what's going to happen is that it's going to require extra arguments that you cannot pass into WP-CLI. At the time of me researching this a little while ago. Therefore, you're going to have to run a MySQL dump manually, and if you don't have control of the server, you can't run it as root. But all that to say, you're going to have to add in extra commands if you have a much larger database. And I'm talking a gig, 2 gigs of just the SQL of the database itself. We're talking essentially multi-site. We're talking, thousands of tables here. We're not talking, the usual WordPress install of like 10 tables. So essentially, this is all of your content. So at this point, you've got your SQL file and you have your physical files of WordPress and your WP content and your uploads, and you have everything. Now you're going to log into the other host, the brand new host, or a self-hosted virtualization server that you've got somewhere. So essentially, somehow log into the new host, and you have to create yourself a MySQL database. This obviously is not a default. It's not there. You have to create a new database for the project. So again, just using phpMyAdmin, you can certainly create a new database, not a problem. And just basically go to your on the left side, new database, give it a name, and at that point, make sure it's lowercase, make sure it's got no spaces, no special characters in the database name. Along with the database, you have to create a user. You have to create basically a user for WordPress. You personally will have an access control. You personally will have access to WordPress. WordPress needs access to the database. So you have to create a user to that WordPress database. Now, what I do is for every one of my installations, every single installation, whether it's development, production, or staging, doesn't matter. There is a specific user for every installation. I have 80 installations. I have 80 users. 1 installation per user, or one user per installation, whatever you want to say. So I basically, yes, this may not be extremely secure, but at least it's it allows WordPress to do what it needs. I do grant all permissions on that one single database. So again, remember, one user, one database. But I do grant all permissions. And on top of that, for an extra level of security, I do make sure that the host, it can only connect from specific hosts. So this user control, I'm making sure that the user can only get to the database from one server, maybe 2 servers at the most. Now, at this point, you've created a brand new user, you've created a brand new password, and we need to change the wp-config file inside WordPress, the WordPress files themselves. Because at this point, you've downloaded WordPress, it has a configuration for the old host. So the old host has a specific configuration, your new host has a new configuration, you've got to change the configuration. So at that point, you've got to look for the wp-config file and change the lines that have defined db name, db user, db password. And also, just personally, I look for the salts. There are specific lines for security salts. Personally, I change those too. But that's just me being a little bit more controlling. Now, I'm going to upload everything to the new server, to the new host, and I start importing my database. So the upload is through FTP, or in my case, I'll use command line tools. But when you're doing the import of the database, again, depends on the size of the database. The bigger the database, the more problems you're going to have. The smaller the database means you can actually use phpMyAdmin. So phpMyAdmin is configured for a certain way on your servers. You might not be able to upload 256 megs through phpMyAdmin. I personally can through my server, that's not a problem. But if the file is 2 gigs for a very large database, this even it will time out. Not going to work for you. Therefore, like the download, you're going to have to upload through the command line and import through the command line. Therefore, like a WPDB export, you can certainly import your files, import your database. And same thing, if you're going to run the raw MySQL command to dump, you have to run the raw MySQL command to insert. Now, what people don't know and don't realize and don't think about is that internally in WordPress, there are a few different bits of information about the old host inside the database that has to get changed. So this is just one field, this is one value inside WordPress, inside the options table as an example. And I have changed a few things, by the way, just so it anonymizes my installation. Basically, as you can see, it's actually targeting var www HTML. That's where WordPress lives on my server. So therefore, what happens is that that's going to be different across different hosts, across different hosting companies. So therefore, that ideally should be changed. It'll work, but ideally it should be changed. So therefore, to change this information, what you're going to need ideally is another product, another tool that lives outside WordPress to change this, to change that information. And this is a good resource to use to change the information within the WordPress database, not using WordPress itself. Though it is using the credentials. It's using the WordPress credentials to get to the database, but it's not using WordPress to change the information. Now, alongside that tool, you can also use WP-CLI. And there are 2 variants, small variations when you're using single sites or multi-site. And when you're using multi-site, you have to add in the --URL and specify the actual domain name. Otherwise, it's not going to know where it came from. And then your blog table, WP _blogs, WP _sites, it's going to have a problem. And it's not going to work. It's going to redirect, or it's going to, or database, I think a database can establish a connection, that's going to come up and it's going to give you a problem. So if you're using multi-site, you have to use this variation when using WP search and replace. Oh, yeah. Oh. Thank you. Okay, so other variations of WP search and replace, what you can also do with the search and replace is you can look for the path. You can look for the protocol. Let's say you're moving from HTTP to HTTPS. What I generally do is when I do a search and replace for protocols, I'm also looking for the two variations, with the triple W, without the triple W. And I move that to a specific one to be with or without triple W. And then, of course, the environment. Let's say, for example, I want to move from a production site to a dev site. I'm going to use WP-CLI to do that and change the internal information there. Now, the host file. Every computer, every device, ideally has a host file. This is the Windows version of it, but basically every device has a host file, and you can change it. This host file is basically the first level at which it says, this domain name is in this location. So when you type into your browser http://something.com, that's the browser goes to the host file. It asks, where is something.com? So something.com could be identified at an IP address. You're forcing an IP address. If nothing's there, it goes to DNS. And DNS will say, something.com is at this IP with this host. So therefore, what happens is that as you're migrating, you're going to use the host file to your advantage. You're going to override the DNS. You're going to say, this domain name, my domain name, is not at old host with old IP. It's at new host with new IP. Therefore, only you are going to see the website on the new host with the new IP. So this is the Windows version of it. You need to use permissions. You need to run it as administrator. You need to run Notepad as administrator to edit the host file to make it actually work. And here's a link to a tutorial to actually really change that host file properly. It gives you a full walkthrough on Linux, Mac, and PC. So yeah, you need to use administrator, edit the Notepad, to use Notepad, and to edit the host file. Now, for Mac, it's actually easier. There's a plugin, there's a program for that called Gas Mask. It allows you to just click and point and change the host file, but it's a similar idea, similar actions. Okay, so now at this point, you've changed your host file. Your computer, not the world, is seeing the fact that you're now moving to another computer, another server, and then you go check the site at this point. And you get this. What's this? Anybody know? Anybody seen this before?
Yes.
White screen of death. So therefore, the white screen of death, what is the white screen of death? Basically what it is that WordPress and the core PHP is having a connection. At that point, what's happening is that it's actually doing a fatal error. PHP, in some level, in some plugin, in some theme, in whatever code you got in that installation, PHP is doing a fatal error. And at this point, you cannot see it. Because in production, in a public site, you ideally don't want those fatal errors to be shown to your users, because that contains sensitive information. That sensitive information ultimately can be used by third parties. It could be used by malicious people, and you've got a hack site. So at that point, when there's a fatal error, at that point you see the white screen. Oh, no, there we go. So a way to mitigate the white screen is to update everything. Update plugins, update themes, update core. Check the PHP versions. What happens is that nowadays we're running into the problem of moving from PHP 5.2 to PHP 7, moving from PHP 5.3, 4, 5, 6 to PHP 7. Guess what? I got a call from one of my faculty. They have a site. Actually, that's part of the screenshot before. They were on some host, and all of a sudden they saw the white screen of death. They don't have no site. Yeah, because the host forced them to PHP 7. And they have a very old site, very old plugins, and at that point, it white screened. So update everything. Generally on the front end, if you have a white screen on the front end, you can ideally, hopefully, probably, maybe, fingers crossed, you should be able to get into the back end, even though you've got a front end white screen of death. So if you can get into the back end, great. If you get in, deactivate all your plugins, and then activate them one by one. Keep checking. Activate a plugin, check. Activate a plugin, check. Once it white screens, you know it's that plugin, whatever plugin it is. Do the same thing with themes. If it's not a plugin problem, it's a theme problem. Switch to a default theme. Install a default theme. Switch to it. See what happens. Does the site load? It will not look right, but at least it'll load. That's what we're looking for. We're not looking for this. We're looking for something, anything, but this. Sometimes I've actually heard about permalinks. In your settings, you have control of permalinks. By resetting your permalinks, that has actually solved some issues. Sometimes it's an htaccess problem. There is an htaccess file that controls routing in WordPress. That htaccess file might not be there. That htaccess file might be corrupt. So you're going to have to check it, compare it against the codex, and verify it's correct. Possibly, which is sometimes the case, the host gives you an index.html file, and WordPress uses an index.php file. Therefore, the index.html file is a white screen. It's a blank file. But the server is using it first. It's going to it first. So if you go something.com and the server brings up index.html and it's a white screen, well, WordPress isn't even loading, but you still have a white screen. So it might be just a comparison between index.html and index.php. By the way, I pulled that off of a Facebook post, and that was the resolution to that Facebook post. It is a live problem that it really happened. And also .maintenance. When you do WordPress updates, there's a maintenance file that happens that's created and then deleted. So that might still be left over from a bad update. That might cause you grief. Now, to see the errors, to see those errors in your wp-config, you can add in wp-debug. So you can set it to true, set the display to true, and you will see those errors, which at that point will give you an idea of what plugin is causing problems or what is really the issue. If you can't do that, or there's an issue still doing that, you can also access the error logs via SFTP or through the CPanel. So ideally, you've got a site that's not doing this and it works and you're happy with when you're going to your new site on your new host. After you've tested everything, cool, we're going to change the DNS. At this point, remember, you're the only one that can see the new site on the new host. Now you're going to make the world see the site on the new host. That's the DNS. So when you do DNS, DNS is basically named to an IP address. But between the IPs, between name to IP, there's something called name servers. Name servers are essentially, you're pointing the name to a company, your hosting company. So in this screenshot, you've got jperlman.ca. I do use DigitalOcean personally for my personal website. Therefore, the hosting company is DigitalOcean. My name servers are ns1.digitalocean.com, ns2.digitalocean.com, ns3.digitalocean.com. So if I were moving to another host, let's say, for example, I'm moving from digital to Linode, digital to Pagely, digital to WP Engine, whatever the case may be, I will certainly change it from ns1.digital to ns1.pantheon.com. So whatever it is, you're changing your host file, changing your DNS records, the name servers, that makes your site live to the world on the new host. Now, just to give you a heads up, there are actually MX records and DNS records that are related on your host. You don't have to change these. Ideally, you shouldn't have to change these. It's only the real name servers that you have to change. And if you do have to change these, then there's a more complex configuration at hand. Now, once you've done the change, the general estimate is that it takes up to 48 hours for the world to see the change. It takes 48 hours to see your site on the new host. So in the meantime, don't delete the site on the old server. You've got traffic going from the old server. You've got traffic going to the old server and the new server at the same time. So what's going to happen is that you're going to have to plan this ideally, I know it's not a great thing, but you might have to do it over a weekend, low traffic. Some things to consider are gravity forms and form submissions on the old host and the new host, and making sure that they sync up. But what you can do is you can verify that the site has been moved, the DNS has been moved with what's my DNS.net. It's a good site that I've used in the past to check the status of the migration of the DNS moving. It uses, I believe, AWS to verify that, and different servers to verify that it knows the IP that you're looking for. Now, all that was without a plugin. We transferred WordPress from host to host without a plugin. You can do it with a plugin, except there's some caveats there. Oh, no, let's do the caveats. So the first two plugins, Duplicator and Backup Buddy, you can migrate a site with those two plugins, except the thing is they only work on single sites. The moment you have a multi-site, everything is experimental and everything is up to you. It may not work. Have fun. It does do the migration of code, the media library, and the content. Updraft Plus, all-in-one WP migration, those two do handle single site and multi-site. The problem is, for the multi-site, it's an add-on. You have to purchase a plugin, an add-on to the plugin to get the multi-site functionality. But yes, they do handle the code, the media library, and the content. And the last two plugins, WP Migrate DB Pro and WP Site Sync, what they do is they do handle both single site and multi-site, but they only handle the library and the content. They don't handle the files. So that you cannot migrate the files with those two plugins. So here's your Backup Buddy. No, here's your Duplicator. And as you see, it's a plugin. You install it, and then you create a package. You migrate the package over, you download the package, download an installer. It'll basically, you then upload that to the new host. It'll take all of the, it'll take all of the guesswork. It'll take all of the work that we just did. It'll basically automate the process. It'll streamline that process. For migrating content via, from let's say a production site to a dev site, this is one of the better tools out there. Deliciousbrains.com, Migrate DB Pro. This basically allows you to migrate the database, migrate information from a production to a development environment. And you want to go from production to development. So the production is the main site, the public site. You want to bring that down into a development installation. You generally don't want to go development into production. At least you don't want to do it after the release. Do it once, fine, but after that, you don't want to do it. And then WP Site Sync, it's a newer plugin, but what happens is that one of its key features is that it'll allow you to migrate content post by post, page by page. And they have other add-ons that allow you to migrate the media specifically, migrate the menus specifically, and essentially it's going to let you pick and choose what you want to migrate. And again, it does it on a post level. It'll capture all of the media along with the post, the metadata with the post, and it'll migrate the post. So personally, I don't have experience with it, but I've heard of it, and it does have good reviews. Also, the company that does this is they're very well known in the community, and they are an active supporter of WordPress and WordCampus in general. So ultimately, the pros and cons of using plugins are that, yes, super easy, super user-friendly. You can export to the cloud, export to Dropbox, export to Google, whatever, Amazon, I'm sure. The thing is, it does automate the process. It will do that find replace within the database. The problems is that, though in higher ed, we have the problem of multi-site, they don't handle multi-site. Timeouts. If you have a large site, not going to happen. The larger the site, the more problems you're going to have. In some of these plugins, you can't use even Cloudflare. Cloudflare is going to interfere with the migration. HT accesses might have to change. You might have to change some files to make these work. Also, the plugins might require non-standard files in non-standard directories to make it all work. So that's not going to be a good thing for somebody who wants to keep a WordPress structure standard. So for resources, wpbeginner.com does essentially have, they've got a full write-up of basically my talk, because I guess, you know, they must have seen this idea, this problem out there in the ecosystem, and they did actually make a full resource that I do recommend that you should check out. The codex on WordPress.org does have moving WordPress, and that's another good resource to check out. And then the support forums. So you can always check out the WordPress.org support forums. And of course, the WPCampus Slack channel, which is another good channel for to reach out for support in moving WordPress. So I'd like to thank you, and I'd like to ask for questions. And of course, that infamous survey that everybody's talking about, please, yes, fill it out. Thank you. So at this point, what time do we have till? We have 10 minutes. We have 10 minutes for questions. So ideally, let's use those 10 minutes, all of those 10 minutes, hopefully. So,
yeah, I have two questions.
Please.
Is, when you're going from a standalone site, not WordPress.com, but someone's running WordPress sites on another server, bringing it into your multi-site network.
Yeah.
Your multi-site network has all of the tables are prefixed by their ID. How do you handle that? Because I've tried it. It takes a lot of careful transfer, because the user's table can't come over. It messes with the existing user's table. Have you done something like that?
The question basically is, how do you actually migrate a single install WordPress into an existing WordPress multi-site environment where table structures are different and IDs are different, users are different, blah, blah, blah. So the answer to that is essentially WordPress export, WordPress import. Unfortunately, the thing is you really can't migrate otherwise. I would not be doing it via SQL. It would be a pain to do it via SQL on that level. But the WordPress exporter importer, what will happen is that it'll just recreate the users with brand new IDs. And those posts will have brand new posts. So it's not exporting the tables, it's that you're exporting the content.
You'll know which tables to put it into.
So in relation to the tables putting it into, what you're gonna have to do is you're gonna have to pre-create the site and then import into the site in your multi-site environment. So you're basically creating those tables that you're trying to wrestle into.
The second question is, so traditionally WordPress is running off of PHP 5.6 and
Sure.
MySQL.
Sure.
And now it says it can go up to 7. It can
Absolutely.
7 points.
Yep.
And I understand there's a lot of issues in just taking your server and going to that
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Plugins and stuff like that.
So at this point, this is a question related to a migration of the server and the infrastructure from PHP 5.6 to PHP 7. At this point, Dawson College is experiencing, we're playing with PHP 7. We're looking into PHP 7. We have a server for PHP 7. I was just speaking with my colleague about the migration to PHP 7, and our plan is to essentially migrate our site to a brand new server. But what we're going to do is we're going to test it on the new infrastructure first, and make sure it all works while the production site is still running. So we're just not going to flip it and then hope it works. We will know if it works or not. We will pre-debug it, pre-test, pre-fix before we go.
Going through your export.
No, not even at that point. At that point, I'm going to be using my tools of command line tools to migrate WordPress, create another copy of the site on another server with PHP 7, and all the fun stuff, the new stuff. And we're just going to duplicate the site and see if it crashes. But actually, we've had good success so far on our test sites, on our test server. No problem. Okay. So I'm just, okay, good enough. Where is there's participants? No, more. So anything on the chat? Are we having any questions from the chat? I guess not. So do we have any questions here? No? Last session. So at this point, I do want to thank you very much. There is going to be the speaker, not the speaker, there's going to be the closing remarks out in that way, the commons. So yeah. Thank you.